Uh, there's a lot of trash around here, and I chose this spot to record just because there's some privacy from this bush. And I'm sitting on a piece of cardboard. I'm not sitting directly in the trash or anything, but I don't say this for sympathy or anything like that, really, but to be very honest with you, it's symbolic of how I feel inside and how I feel like I'm living right at the moment. So anyways, this video is basically obviously I wanted things to go a different way, and I've said that until I'm beating a dead horse, but you guys have asked some certain questions, and I didn't want to answer those questions until my mind was right, and until I could until I could do it in a more organized and succinct way. And honestly, not like this, and not while I'm dealing with all of this emotional turmoil. But the questions keep coming up, and so I'm just gonna throw it out there. So it's just not the way I wanted to do it. But anyway, so I want to address your questions as to why I don't accept some of the help that people post in the comments section. Some people have offered housing and even an RV and up on their property and things like that. So I want to address that right now, and I'm going to try to do it in as concise a manner as possible. But I do want to give you a little bit of history and background so that you can understand where I'm coming from. Now, I did address this on a previous video, those videos that were an hour each. There was 2 of them, and those videos took me 5 days to edit. They took me a long time, all day long, and they were very long videos, and I got them as short as I could, and my mind's all over the place. But so I do feel like I answered the question, but it was vague, and I did plan on addressing it more succinctly, as I said. But so hopefully this will be sufficient, and we can move on, because I need to move on, and I hope you will too, because it's very hard to express, because I'm very grateful. I am overly grateful for the offers. I really am, and yet I cannot do them. And hopefully you will understand why by the end of this video, and maybe you won't, and maybe I won't be able to say enough, because I don't want this video to be an hour. But do know that I honestly just really appreciate it. So to give you a little bit of timeline previous to the answer, I graduated from high school. I went overseas for a little bit and did some volunteer work. Came back to the States, and I had a little business going that I had started. It wasn't that big of a deal, but it was something. And then I went to college. I wasn't planning on going to college per se, because I didn't want to end up with a bunch of debt. But I went to college and I worked at the same time. I took about 18 credits, so I graduated in 3 years. Got a business degree, and then after college, I was saving all throughout college, eating practically nothing, and I was just saving and scrimping and saving everything that I possibly could. And after college, my intention was to be able to flip houses and invest in real estate and do things like that. But when the time came, I had never had a credit card. I had never been in debt. I told myself I would never be in debt my whole life. And so I never had a credit card or anything. So when I went to the bank and I talked to them about my plan and things like that, obviously I didn't have enough money to buy a home outright or anything like that, but I could have had at least some of a down payment to start small. But you know, the interest that they would have given me and everything else was way too high because I didn't have any credit history. So now during my final year of college, this idea came to me. I want to say kind of out of nowhere, but not necessarily. But this idea came to me of doing an around the world trip. One thing led to another, and I did. I bought a ticket and I went around the world. Now, I will do a whole video on that, but the long and short of it is I thought the idea was a bad idea because I didn't save the money to spend it. I saved the money to invest it, but I felt propelled, and so I went. I do not regret that. It was a wonderful time of my life, and not for all of the obvious reasons, but because of how much I learned and what a classroom it was. Towards the end of that around the world trip, I actually lived in England for a while, and for almost a year, and worked. And then I was going to go to the Middle East and go through the Middle East, or I was going to come back to the United States and do a cross-country trip on a motorcycle. I decided not to do the Middle East because I wanted to do more research and have more knowledge about certain places with the Old and New Testament, and so that the trip would be more educational and spiritual for me. So I decided to save that for another time in my life. I came back to the United States. I did end up buying a motorcycle. I did a cross-country trip, and I worked along the way. Now, when I had got to the West Coast, which is essentially where I spent most of my life, I did a few different things, but the long and short of it is I ended up choosing to making some choices that I ended up making some choices to help some people, and along with that, as things evolved, that is where I had a trauma happen in my life. And if I was somebody else, maybe it wouldn't have been quite as traumatic, but I'm not somebody else, I'm me. And it flipped my whole life, my whole world inside out. And thus began what I wouldn't know at the time, but thus began a decade of despair. It's a good way to describe it. A decade of despair and destruction. So everything that I had tried to build up while I was young, and I was a very goal-oriented individual, so everything that I had tried to build up, bit by bit, began to be destroyed. And I couldn't handle it. So the purpose of this video is not to talk about that time or that trauma. It's enough to say that that happened, and then began a decade of began a decade of utter destruction and despair. So the reason I give you the history is because I have a pattern in my life, and I didn't realize all of it at the time. There's a few different patterns that I have, and some of them I was aware of. I didn't know how bad they could be. Others of them I wasn't really aware of, but they've proven to be a nemesis to me. So this is very hard to talk about, and I hope in the end that you guys can really just understand where I'm coming from. But one of those patterns that I wasn't really aware of, but has since proven to happen over and over and over throughout my life, choices that I've made, is helping people. And that's not a bad thing, so I don't want to throw the baby out with the bathwater. But maybe you could call it OCD. Maybe you could call it codependent. Somebody said that. Whatever you want to call it, it's something that I deal with, and I have. And when I help somebody who's very close to me, I do go too far, and my emotions are all wrapped up in it. When I help somebody who's not necessarily close to me, I still go too far. Maybe my emotions aren't wrapped up into it, but that OCD, if you want to call it that, where when I start something, I like to do it well, if you haven't caught on to that, and I like to finish it. And I'm not a multitasker, so it becomes the only thing that I can focus on. Now, are these good things? Am I promoting these things? No. Can they be good things? I think a lot of our talents are also our weaknesses. I think a lot of our strengths are also our nemesis. So, some of these things can be very good, depending on the situation and depending on how far you let it go. So sometimes I let it go too far, and sometimes the situation envelops me. So I've learned this about myself, but it's taken many years. And I look back and I think, you're not very smart, because it's pretty obvious that that's a pattern. But I don't know. Maybe it is, maybe it isn't. It wasn't obvious to me until I started seeing it over and over and over and over. And I started realizing that at the end, I would help people, they would need the help. In the end, I was left right back where I started, back in my own life, with not having moved forward very much. So that still sounds vague, so let me try to unpack that a little bit more. Basically, not talking about the codependency sort of pattern of helping people, but let's just say the OCD pattern of helping people. So I'm not talking about these people being close to me. These people are people I just met, or people who maybe I knew a little bit, but there's no real intimate relationship. But somebody needs help, and maybe sometimes I also need the help. So like in this situation, living indoors, having a home, being able to having a place of safety and security and warmth and all of that sort of stuff. So, and then maybe somebody has that to offer. You can call it pride, you can call it stubbornness, you can call it whatever you want, but I don't want to just take it for free. Okay? I don't. And again, I will do another video on that. But so I want it to be an exchange. I want to offer you something if you're going to give me something. So some of you are thinking, great, let's do that exchange then, because that's what many of those offers have been, an exchange. You can come stay at my home, or you can stay in this RV and you can work on my property, or you can do some things that that I need done, or things like that to work off the rent. And so that sounds great, but I've been in that situation many times. I've been in that situation many times. And my personality is, whatever it is that you need that we're doing in exchange, I go way too far. One, because I never want you to feel like I've taken more than my share. So I want to go above and beyond. Two, when I start a project, so let's say this is in exchange, I'm gonna clear out the back of your property. Now, let's give some real life examples. So in one example, I cleared out the back of somebody's property. They had a whole acre, and we're talking like this hasn't ever been cleared out, and they wanted shrubs and trees and oh my gosh, I love them, but they were a pack rat, they were a hoarder, and they had I'm talking just sockets, okay? Just sockets, like a tool that you use to wrench things and stuff like that. Just sockets. They had, I want to say, 30 5-gallon buckets just full of sockets. Just sockets. We're not talking saws, we're not talking hammers, we're not talking wrenches, we're not talking pliers, we're not talking the myriad of tools that a lot of people, specifically men, have. We're just talking sockets. So you can imagine all the other tools. You can imagine the workshop. You can imagine all the other projects. Many of you men might understand this because you're project people. But sometimes the project becomes too much and you don't finish the project. And so you have 10 or 20 projects that need to be done. And I go into the picture and they want me to clean it out and organize it and this and that and the other, and I'm more than happy to do that. That is in my wheelhouse. I can be very organized and methodical. So, but when I do a job, I like to do it well, and I think about it on my off hours, because if you're going to organize something and do it well, you have to have a plan in mind. So I become consumed by the project, and when I'm doing an exchange, I want you to be getting more value than I'm getting. So I go above and beyond. And I have tried to curb this in myself for a long time, but it is not curbable. Not at this point anyways. I need to work on that. But that's something that's ingrained in me that's going to take a very long time So right now, I just recognize that while it's a strength in some scenarios, if I get myself in other scenarios, it's very much a weakness. So I need to be careful of those scenarios. And this has taken me many, many, many years and many projects and many work environments and many exchanges to recognize that this is a problem for me. Let me relay it in a different way. If I was an alcoholic, some of you can drink alcohol and you can have one beer and that's it. Others of you cannot even step inside a bar. And you might say, well, just come inside the bar. You can have just a Sprite. You don't have to, you just enjoy the music. If I was an alcoholic, I couldn't even go inside the bar. And I only use that as a scenario because I know alcohol can be very addictive. But this is very addictive to me, oddly enough. I mean, I don't know how else to explain it except to say that it's a problem for me. I know it's a problem. I don't know how to fix it. Other people cannot help me fix it. So therefore, I must stay away from that particular scenario. And that is the scenario that's being offered to me. I am so grateful. I am so grateful for the offer. But I have done this over the last, not even just 10 years, because this isn't something that's new to me. I have done this since I was a child. But let's say specifically in the last 10 years, during this decade of despair for me, I have done these exchanges, and I haven't gotten paid for them because we're doing an exchange, right? I'm living on their property in exchange for doing this. And in the end, I've spent months and months, sometimes years, and that project is done for them, but it's time for me to move on, and I walk away with nothing because I've made no money, and while this is in my wheelhouse of talents, it's not what I want to do with my life. And it doesn't give me, it does distract me a little bit because I can focus on organization and but every time I'm done with work at the end of the night, I'm in the depths of depression and despair. So it hasn't helped me heal. It hasn't helped me move forward emotionally. It hasn't helped me move forward financially. It hasn't helped me move forward socially because I get so enveloped that that's all I'm gonna do. And I'll start at 6 in the morning and I won't stop until basically they force me to. So sometimes that's even midnight, 1 o'clock. It depends on the situation, and I'll just go. Sometimes I don't stop to eat. This is how it is. So I know this about myself. I like the feeling when the project's done. But after doing that so many times and realizing that time is passing, I'm just getting older. And I really don't have much to show for anything. While I loved doing that for the person, and I know they were very grateful. And I know I was grateful for letting them, and I know I was grateful for them giving me what they gave me. I don't know what else to say, but it wasn't an upward climb. And again, like something on top of that, which is more important to me than any of this, is that one of the reasons I'm in this situation is because of that trauma, because of that emotional turmoil and depression. And what gets me out of that is not just to work and not just to have shelter over my head, but it's purpose. If you go back and watch that video from Invisible People, that I haven't watched it, okay? But I know in that I said purpose was my thing. I mean, that's even the title that Mark gave it. So while organizing somebody's backyard or their house or their junkyard or their business or I mean, their storage unit. I've done it in thousands of scenarios. I've done it in 1,000 ways for people. And even if I got paid, like, I guess if I got paid, then at least that would have been something to move to the next step. But, and I will tell you, there was the very last thing that I did get paid for, but that is another video. So, but even if I got paid in those scenarios, like, that's not, the shelter and the payment isn't the biggest thing for me. It's this trauma, it's this turmoil, it's this depression, it's this lack of purpose. The lack of purpose leads me to the suicide. And, you know, I hate to say that so vocally because I don't want people to freak out or worry or whatever, but man, let me just say it vocally. That's where my depression leads. Some people can be depressed and they don't have suicidal ideation is what they call it. So then the most common reply to what I'm saying right now is, well, then you need to go into major therapy. You need to, you know, somebody said I need to go into you know, offer myself to a mental institution, you know, commit myself to a mental institution. And again, those videos that I did a few videos ago, you know, 2 hours, those videos were, I told you that I've been to like 7 different therapists. So I'm not going to spend this video talking about that. But that's a logical conclusion, and I agree with that. But I have been to 7 different therapists. I have tried many different things. It's not working. So my plan for right now is finding purpose. This YouTube is my purpose, but it is taking me a while to really get myself out of first gear as far as YouTube is concerned, because I have to deal with some of these traumas. I have to deal with that decade of destruction, and I have to put some of those pieces together before I can move on with being fully enveloped in YouTube and in my plan and in these 7 paths. So, and it's a Mount Everest. It is eating an elephant, and you have to do it one bite at a time. It's just with my OCD, with my perfectionist mentality, you know, with my drive and high expectations, it's hard for me. And put all of that aside, just dealing with the destruction and the choices that I've made and where I'm at, and still dealing with some of that trauma, but trying to put it aside so that I can move forward. And all of that depression and all of that, what that means to me, and my physical body and all of the different ailments that I'm dealing with right now, and the isolation, and it's a lot. And yeah, there are 2 people in my life right now that I'm still trying to help, and which again, so you'll come back to me and say, well, you know, you can't help anybody else until you can help yourself. I know. But ultimately, all of this is about who I'm becoming and what type of person I'm going to be. It really isn't about a lot of other more obvious things. So I don't want to let go of my helping nature. I just need to learn how to curb some of it and put some boundaries down. But that's just the thing, is this is part of my boundary. This is part of what I've learned. Now I've recognized a pattern. So I'm putting my foot in the ground now, which some of you are having a hard time dealing with. And some of you are now saying, well, you just want to be homeless then. That's not true. But I am willing to go through what I'm going through right now to get where I need to go, and the place that I need to go and that I want to go, and not what somebody else needs or wants for me. And even if somebody just gave it to me for free, like I already said, I'll do a video on that. But I can't do that. I can't do that right now. Man, I say these things to you guys, and then, see, I don't want the video to be so long. But I don't know how to answer some of these questions because they're deep questions in my opinion, and I don't know how to answer them in a condensed way. Because, you see, it's not just about housing for me. It's not just about shelter. So even if you offered it to me for free, I'm still dealing with all of this emotional and trauma and everything else. I need the purpose. And part of that purpose is my character and who I'm becoming, and part of that is my struggle. I think right now in our world, everybody's just so concerned with feelings and feelings and feelings, and this person offended me, and this person did this, and this person did that, and I don't feel this, and I don't feel that, and I think we're being consumed by our feelings and our struggles, and well, that's a struggle, let's alleviate that struggle, let's do this. But you know, our ancestors struggled, and that's how they became the people they were, and a lot of them were really great people. It's because of those struggles, and they kept their morals intact, and they increased in their character. So, going back to the main thing, because I'll talk about those other things on another video. But going back to the main thing is, I appreciate the offer, because I will tell you, when I travel around the world, and many, many times since then, people have offered things out of the goodness of their heart for me, and it is humbling, it is flabbergasting what people will offer. So those of you who have offered, I mean, it is like amazing that you would do that. And I've always accepted the offers in the past. That's how I've begun to realize that I have a pattern here. That I've accepted the offers, and despite what I had planned in my head, what I wanted to do with my life and how I needed to go forward, I took that left turn just because the door opened. And then I take on what that person either has planned for me, or what they need, or even still, when you're living with or by or near somebody, you have to, that's a relationship, and that also takes up time and effort, which isn't bad. It's just not where I need to be right now. So it's humbling, and I appreciate it. But this time I'm going to do it my way, and I'm going to do what I need to do to go down the path that I think I need to go down. Even if that looks hard in the beginning and it looks like a struggle and it looks like it's not working. Then I need to fail on my own. This really is a pattern for me, and it really is something that I almost can't help. When I enter somebody else's domain and we make this sort of exchange or agreement, I take on everything from what needs to be done, and I can't clock out. And then time passes, and it's time for me to hit the road, and I leave with the exact same stuff that I came with, and I still don't have a purpose. So I'm not getting better. And that's what's taken a really long time with this. I'm going to tell you about a guy that I did that with, one of the last experiences I had. I've already mentioned him in another video, so I don't want to belabor it, but the long and short of it is we made a deal, we made an exchange, and he offered for me to stay at his house. He wanted me to stay inside. I don't live with men unless I'm married to them, so I wouldn't stay inside, but I slept in his backyard in a tent. I cleaned up his backyard, I cleaned up his garage. We made this deal. The deal was then I could build a shed and move out of the tent into a shed, and I could be on his property, and I could be the caretaker, and I could do things for him that he needed done, you know, because he was getting old. He was in his 70s, and I could take care of anything that he needed that he couldn't do for himself, and I could live there for free for 2 to 5 years. He offered 5 years. I was thinking 2. I was thinking 2 would get me back on my feet, and I could do this channel and all of that sort of stuff. So I had been there long enough to see his process and to see where he would give me my privacy and my separation. I was very determined that I wasn't going to go over the line, but I did, because I wanted to finish the project, and I was going to start YouTube. I didn't, because I was enveloped in it. And then when I finished all the work and the time came for, he put money in his bank so that we could build this shed. It was going to be on his property in his shed once I left, but you know, we were ready for me to get my benefit now. And I was benefited just by being in a tent and on his property, to be honest. I was grateful for that. But it came time for the tide to change and for us to focus on what I needed. And he passed away. And like I said, I already mentioned this in another video, and I'm having a really hard time dealing with it even still. It's been a year. Almost. It's coming up on his anniversary, and I loved him, you know. In a friendship way, I care for people, and I came to care for him, and I have a really hard time with that. the video there, but because I can't really talk about him. So, but you know, his family came, and that was the end of it. Essentially, they kicked me to the curb, and I was right back where I started. After almost 2 years of working this thing out, and not really 2 full years, a full year, but because COVID interrupted it, and I went on a side jaunt. But a year, you know, and so despite losing a friend, and as far as myself, which honestly is the lesser part of the story, because losing him was the bigger part. But speaking to that lesser part, I was right back where I started. So I know some of you say, well, no, we want to just give it to you for free. That will be another video for another time, but that doesn't really necessarily work either. So I appreciate it, because I know you see that I need help. And that's all you're trying to offer, and that's good of you. But I'm not gonna do it again, and no, it's not because I mean, some of you are just judging me, and you don't know my heart and soul, and you don't know why I make some of the choices I make. And if you did know why, you might still disagree with them, but they're not all bad, and they're not just dumb or silly, and it's not all stubbornness. Some of it's come because of hard knocks, and I recognize logic. And I hate putting this stuff out here like this. So, anyways, hopefully that's sufficient, because I'm not gonna go. It hurts. It does hurt when and I don't want to hurt you by saying this, but it does hurt sometimes when I get those texts. The offers, I understand are out of the goodness of your heart, but it makes me feel, you know. But then the texts where people are judging my intentions or my feelings, I mean, you can judge my choices, but you don't always know why somebody chooses certain things. And does that even matter why somebody does? I don't know, but I think I've said enough, so have a good day.